Hi guys, hope you all doing well and welcome back to our series of Azure Active Directory. And in this video, I'm going to talk about privileged identity management portal configuration. Now, if you're watching the series from the beginning, in the last video, we have discussed about privileged identity management theoretical part, and the agenda of this video will be knowing how to configure privileged identity management, what are the different role settings that can be customized, and then we'll talk about two different workflows wherein a user has to complete MFA as well as the approval should be given by the owner of a particular role. So let's start off by knowing the license requirement and how you should check whether privileged identity management service is enabled in your tenant or not. So for that, I have switched to my browser where I'm signed in to portal.azure.com and now I'm going to click on licenses. The first option that I'm getting here is licensed feature, and as you can see that since my tenant currently has Azure AD Premium P2, that's the reason privileged identity management is getting listed here. So this is one of the way wherein you can check whether the licenses that you have, is there privileged identity management service available in your tenant or not. Just for your information, this is available in my tenant because I have EMS E5 SKU and that has Azure AD Premium P2 included by default. Now let's talk about how you should enable this service. So for that, you have to click on all services and then here just check for privileged identity management. So this is the tab that you will get and you have to click here. Now, since I have already verified my identity, but assume this would have been my first attempt. So in that case, there will be a ribbon here which will ask me to verify my identity and then onboard PIM in a particular tenant. So if you're trying this for the first time in your tenant, you'll get a ribbon over here wherein you have to verify your identity. When I say verify your identity, enabling privileged identity management requires the MFA process to be completed. So make sure you are registered for MFA and then you can enable privileged identity management. This is the first console that you can access directly by clicking on Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. But even if you'll click on Identity Governance and then you'll click on Manage Role Assignment, again, you will land up to same console. Now, in my previous video, I have mentioned that whichever account you will use to enable privileged identity management, that will by default become member of two particular roles, and those roles are privileged role admin as well as security admin. So the first role that's getting listed here is privileged role admin, and if I'll click on this, as you can see, my account with which I have activated privileged identity management in this tenant is getting listed. The same applies to security admin as well, and here also the same account will get listed. So we have covered about the roles with which the account that you will be using to enable privileged identity management gets associated, and we have also discussed about license. Now let's start off by knowing all the options that are available on privileged identity management console and how you can make changes or how you should assign a eligible role to any of your user. So to begin with, the first section is tasks. Now this console that I see right now is the one which actually I'll be using to control all the settings. But let's say what will be the experience if a user will sign in. So the very first thing that you have to make sure that the admin, which will be making all the changes, he or she should have Azure AD Premium P2 license assigned, as well as the user who will be requesting access through privileged identity management, he or she should also have access, or he or she should also have a license assigned, then only they will be able to view this console. Now this task section, all these options, my role, my request, approve request, and review access, these will be relatively same for user as well as admin. The only difference between a user and admin is that if I click on Azure AD roles from a user session, as you can see, this option is grayed out, which says assign eligibility, as well as the entire manage section is also grayed out, apart from access review. Now, this is a separate topic altogether, which I will be covering in a different video. So as of now, just assume this is the difference that you will get in console. Now, if I'll go back to my other browser where I'm signed in as an admin, and I'll click on Azure AD roles, you'll see all these options are enabled for admin, whereas the same options will be grayed out for a particular user. Now I'll switch back to my browser where I'm signed in as an admin, and let's just check all these options. So the first option is my role, wherein a user, all eligible roles will get listed, as well as the current active roles which are either assigned as an eligible role or permanently assigned to any user will get listed. Now, since this is the admin session, so that's the reason why I'm getting these three options. But if I go back to my user, there'll be a different set of options. As you can see that this user already has these two eligible roles, and there are no active roles found for this user. The next option is my request, wherein if I will request any elevated access, that will get listed here. This will list all the requests that I have to approve, wherein let's say this particular user, which is global, has been added as an approver for any elevation request, that will get listed here. Now this option is again moreover related to access review, which I will be covering in a different video. So if you'll compare these four options from admin as well as user perspective, they are almost same. So now let's go back to my session again, wherein I'm signed in as an admin, and let's start now with the manage section. So the first option that I get here is Azure AD roles, and if I'll click on assign eligibility, all the roles which are available in Azure AD will get listed. Now the very simple fundamental here is because I have selected this option. Now, if I'll click on Azure AD custom roles, all the custom roles that I have created will get listed. But since this tenant doesn't have any custom roles, so it is showing as no results. The third one is Azure resources, wherein all the roles which are available in a particular subscription will get listed the moment you will click on role. So the process of assigning roles is almost same in all these three components. But to begin with, I'll just click on Azure AD roles so that I can show you something which you can easily go ahead and do in your test or in your production environment. So from this console now, we can actually click on assign eligibility, and then we can move on with assigning different roles to different users. But the very first fundamental of using privileged identity management solution is to know what is the current state of your tenant. Now, what do I mean by this? That before you even enable privileged identity management in your tenant, you must be aware that how many users have already assigned a permanent privileged role. So for that, what you can do is you can click on Wizard and then click on the very first option which says Discover Privileged Roles. Now this is actually going to list all the roles which have active assignment of users, either with permanent privilege or with eligible assignment. Now let's say that I want a particular report reader user to be converted to eligible instead of just giving them the privilege to access this information or to act as a report reader all the time. So as of now, as you can see, that report reader role has two members, MCAS and MFA. The next thing that I can do is, since the agenda is now defined that I have to convert one of the role for MFA, let's say from eligible, or let's say from permanent to eligible. So what I'll do is I'll select report reader and then I'll select this user and I'll click on next. And as you can see that this role was permanently assigned to this particular user, and now what I'm getting is that the moment I'll click on OK, this assignment will be changed now as an eligible assignment. So this is the very first fundamental which you should do, at least to check what are the current roles which are already assigned with permanent privilege to a different set of users, and then you can make rest of the changes. Now let's start off by knowing or by making changes from the roles which are getting listed here. Now, as you can see that all the roles that are getting listed here, there are moreover related to Azure AD because we are not checking the options that are available with Azure AD custom roles and Azure resource. That means the roles which are associated with subscription. Now, if I'll click on any of the roles which are getting listed here, let's take an example of directory writers itself. As you can see, now I'm getting the option of adding a particular member. Now, the moment I will click on here and I will try to search my user, I can assign the actual privilege which is required. So I'll select my user account and I'll click on select and then I will click on OK. So as of now, what I have done is through PIM console, I have assigned one of my user as an eligible member for a role called directory writers. But still, we have not defined any workflow process. Likewise, whether when the user will try to request access, he or she should be prompted for any MFA or for any approval process or not. Now let's just see that whether this user is getting listed here or not. Otherwise, I'll sign out and sign in. So as you can see now that this user is getting listed as an eligible assignment, which is required for directory writers. So now, since we have added the assignment, the next step is to go ahead and make changes and define workflows, right? So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm again going to click on Azure AD roles, and now I'm going to click on settings icon, and then I'm actually going to click on roles. And then I will be selecting my roles which I have just assigned, and that is directory writers. And now as you can see that I'm getting all the options which can be customized depending upon the workflow that you want. So the first option here says that maximum activation hours is 5 hours. It cannot be activated for more than 5 hours. User will get the privilege to reduce this limit, but they cannot increase it. The next thing is all the admins should be notified, yes or no. Now, if you are an enterprise that follows very strong ITSM models and you want a proper service request number or change request number for every role elevation that's happening in your enterprise, you can actually give an option to your user to enter a ticket number. It's a form of text box wherein a user has to enter a particular ticket number, and that will be shown while the approver will get a notification or an email wherein he or she has to approve a privileged access. The next option is MFA, but what you can see here that this option is grayed out. Now the reason behind this is that some of the roles which have high privilege on your directory, for them MFA is enabled by default. Now let's say I'll choose an option of help desk admin. As you can see that this option is now not grayed out and I can actually enable or disable this. But if I go back to directory writers, as you can see, I'm not getting the option to customize the setting because if any user is trying to request an elevated privilege as a directory writer, that particular user has to approve the MFA process. The next thing that we see here is requires approval. That means whether any user who is trying to request a directory writer role, whether that request has to be approved or not. So as of now, I have added approver, the same global admin account with which I'm signed in right now. So now what all we have done, we have actually assigned a member to a particular role, which is directory writer. As you can see here, right now it's not showing any active members because only the assignment part is completed. The request has not been initiated by a particular user. So now what we'll do is I'll switch to my browser where I'm signed in as a user. And now I will click on my roles and I'll just refresh this just to see that whether directory writers is getting listed or not. And as you can see, now I'm getting the option of directory writers. So as a user, what I have to do is I have to click on activate. Now, there's one more thing which I would like to address here, and that is this option of verify your identity before proceeding. Now, initially, when I signed in with this user object, I have not completed any MFA process, but since this role activation requires MFA, that's the reason why I'm getting this prompt. Now, there is one more thing which is very clear here, and that is that if you are enabling MFA workflow for any of the privileged access, for any of your users, you have to make sure that those users are registered for MFA so that they can request elevation. Now, the moment I'll click on verify my identity, an MFA process will get initiated and I'll receive a text code which I have to verify. So now I'm going to enter the code that I have received and I'll click on verify. Now, as you can see that the MFA process is completed, but still there is one more additional step that I have to do, and that is I have to give the ticket number and then this request will be sent for approval. Now, I again go back to my role section and I'll click on activate for directory writers. And now let's see what is the workflow that we see. So as you can see that now I'm not getting that option of verify my identity because this session has MFA as a claim, which this service understands that yes, the user has already completed the second factor authentication. Now I'm going to click on activate, and as you can see here it shows 5 hours. Now the reason behind that is when we were configuring the settings for directory writer roles, over there, we have mentioned that the maximum limit for which a requested privilege access can be given is only 5 hours. So as you can see here, it is 5. That's the reason a user is getting as an upper limit of 5. Then we have said that we need the ticket number. So that's the reason why the user is getting this option. So let's say I'm going to enter a ticket number and then I'm going to name my particular application or ticketing system that I use. And let's say I don't want to type anything for justification. And then I will click on activate. So right now, MFA is completed. The request has been sent for approval. The next step that we have to do is the admin has to approve this request. So if as a user, I'll try to check my request section, it'll actually show me the request which has been sent and the access that will be given once the approval has been completed. So now I'll switch to my browser where I'm signed in as admin, and now I will click on approve request, and as you can see this request is getting listed here. So all I have to do is I'll have to click on approve, and then I can just give some example, likewise GA or anything as an approval reason, and then I can approve this request. Now, once this approval process is completed and the user will try to refresh the My Request section, this request which was showing upon approval should be active and it will show you the time here as well. Let's wait for 2 minutes and again refresh the same portal. And as you guys can see now, the start time is populated. And then in addition, this access is for 5 hours. Now what I have to do is I have to sign out and sign in so that I can make all the changes that I have to do as a directory writer role. So if I talk about the options that you should know and how you should enable all these settings, they are all covered. Now the only option which is left, and that is this alert section. So there is nothing new and there is nothing complicated in this alert section. All it has is two set of options, wherein roles, if being assigned outside PIM, the admins should be notified, and roles that don't require MFA to be completed should get listed here. So as you can see that there are 4 roles which are configured for activation without requiring MFA. This is highly discouraged. It's all sort of recommendation which Microsoft gives you. If you want, you can adhere them, and if you want, you can just leave it. It's completely your choice. But this is something which is really important, wherein you have to make sure that, if any assignment is being done outside PIM, that means if I go to Azure Active Directory and if I click on role and if I simply permanently assign any privileged role to any of my user, all the admins should be notified. That's the actual purpose of this option here, which says notify admins if any role has been assigned outside PIM. This is the actual purpose of this option. So this was all about knowing what are the different options which are available on PIM, what all changes you can make. If you guys think that I have missed something, please let me know in the comment section and I'll try to cover up in the next video. So let's talk about a quick summary of what all we discussed. In this video, we have discussed about how you should configure privileged identity management, what are the different role settings that you can do, and how does MFA and approval process works. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach me. Also, in the next video, I'm going to talk about self-service password reset. Now, if you guys have learned something new, please feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Bye bye.